Alrighty. Thank you to Masego for being here to just open up the floor in such a wonderful way, man, all the way from wherever that homie was. I see we have so many people out here watching our live stream. I want to say hello and welcome to all of you. We've got Mozambique in the building. I've seen Cape Town. I've seen Gauteng. So start us off by letting us know where you're at. And thank you for being here. I'm super excited for what we have in store. To our established guest of today, Miss Pelonomi, thank you for your time and your space. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say to us. And maybe just to give a shout out to who else we have on the panel this morning. We have Carly, Letsiwe, and Michael repping the Umuzi team, as well as myself. And yes, guys, we've got a really beautiful little lineup today. Pelonomi's here to chat to us about some super interesting things. I haven't quite been able to work out what it means at all, but I guess that's why she's here to tell us all about it. I think along the lines of artificial intelligence and all the weird and wonderful questions that have been popping up in that realm, but Pelonomi has posed a very interesting take of whether machines themselves should be protecting themselves from us rather than the other way around. And I'm super keen to hear what on earth that might mean. I'm not going to take too much time to introduce Pelonomi because I think she will do herself all the justice. But she is a radical human being doing incredible things across the board. And I'm super excited to hear from you. Thank you for being here as the first guest of our series of events happening this Women's Month at Umuzi and the African Coding Network space. We have such a powerful lineup of events that will play out over the rest of this month, and I'm stoked that you are kicking us off. I think to our audience watching, wherever you are, the comments are there for you to engage and ask questions in whatever way that you'd like. Let us know where you're dialing in from, who you are, and what you have to say. We will take questions as we go. This is a dialogue and a conversation, so please feel free to engage as much as you like there. And with that, I will hand over, I don't know where you are on the screen for everyone else, but here's the mic. Do the thing, and let me know when you're ready for your presentation that I will share.
Excellent. I think we're ready to go. I mean, I'll be as prepared as I can be. Right. Yeah. So thanks for joining us, everybody. I have no idea how many of you are here because we're in a private room. But yeah,
Mystery.
super happy to be here. Absolute mystery. And thanks to the Umuzi team. I know not necessarily from direct personal experience, but the personal experiences of people that I care about, that Umuzi is a great place to learn about what it means to exist in this world that has been decided for us. And I'm super glad to be part of this experience. So yeah, welcome to my clickbait talk, Protecting Machines from Us. It's kind of a long-standing talk that I've been giving since 2018, 2019, that gets recycled and it grows as the conversations and discussions grow, and as I speak to more people and more people hear it and give their thoughts and their feedbacks. And yeah, it's really just about understanding technology in the context of humanhood, and what that means for us and what that means for our future and the type of technology that we would like to see there. So for a lot of us, this thing doesn't do animations, damn, it's fine. For a lot of us, our ideas of what AI is come from popular culture and film. And a lot of those images are around anarchy, destruction, Armageddon, the end of the world and the human race, because machines decide that humans aren't the greatest, and that we need to be put in our place, which in some ways is not completely wrong. I mean, we know that the Homo sapien species is the most brutal of all humanoid species that ever existed. We just like killed off everybody else, and we seem to be doing the same to the other species that we share the planet with. That's not to say that then AI is within its rights to then decide we're not need to be here anymore. But what we also find is that these representations in popular film are also not necessarily reflective of what we're dealing with the reality that we have in the everyday today. And what that reality looks like is in fact a lot more different. So wonderful people on my team at Lelapa AI went and asked ChatGPT to count in isiZulu. And as you can see there, very much a lol.
Wow.
Counts Gu1, Gu2, Gu3, Gu4.
That's
Even if you don't speak isiZulu, you can probably guess that that's not correct. And this is the most sophisticated technology that we've seen in a really, really long time. This is the version before the one that has been released to the public. So there have been improvements made since then. But even though we're on this way to this technological future, there is still a lot of progress to be had. But also just to make sure that we're all on the same page about what this AI thing is. And it occurred to me just a week ago that people speak about AI as if it's one thing, like one machine that does all the things. And it's not one machine that does all the things. And we're just going to unpack what are the things that it does do. So there are very many different definitions of what intelligence is or is not. And I just randomly took this one. I didn't even reference where it came from, but intelligence being this idea that it is the ability to adapt one's behavior to fit new circumstances. So you're able to learn from your environment and allow that your interaction with that environment to then inform your next steps. And when we see it within the computational realm, what that means is that we have certain components that make up this sphere of artificial intelligence, artificial because it's not real. So one of those components is ML, or machine learning. This is where we have fancy mathematics that is able to just predict the next most probable move. That's basically all it does. That's what ChatGPT does. It doesn't actually understand anything. It just predicts what is going to be the most likely word to come next in the sentence. And that's how it forms intelligence, and why it's artificial, because it's not actually coming from a will and intent place. It's just the next most probable thing. Another component of that is through automation, which has triggered a lot of fears in the world, because automation often means a loss of jobs, as any other technological revolution has instigated change. What that change means is that the world changes and things change. And yeah, in here, this means automation. There's also this thing called cloud. I mean, I'm an electrical engineer by training, and for the longest time, I was like, what is the cloud? How is it that all these things happen in the cloud? Turns out the cloud is not a cloud. The cloud is just a computer that isn't where you are. And then the information flows down a cable in order for you to then have access to that information. It's not in the sky, it's on the ground. And it just means that you're sending information to be processed somewhere else, so that the computer that you're doing is not in front of you, it's somewhere else. And you send the information to and from that computer that does the computation. Another component is robotics. This is predominantly the view that we have of this technological future, of these chunks of metal walking around doing things, or roaming around on your carpet cleaning it. And then IoT, which is this idea that you have sensory information from the world in order to inform how technology behaves. So air quality monitors, or something that detects that your plant is dry and therefore needs water, and then is able to automate the process of watering it or something like that. And where we are in this realm of AI is at this place where AI is kind of smaller in its capacity to be able to function than a human being. I think we really underestimate the magnificence that is like the human form in terms of the number of computations it makes to do something as simple as catch a ball, where it needs to be able to see, it needs to be able to have fine control over its motor movement, needs to have intent and will. And at this point, we're just at a place where computers cannot fathom what that is. Never mind, can we try to replicate it? The idea then is that at some point in the future, AI and humans will be on more of a equitable level in terms of our capabilities, and this is what we call AGI, or artificial general intelligence. And this is what the people in Silicon Valley are kind of aiming for, and experiments like ChatGPT are trying to act in pursuance of this goal of artificial general intelligence. I don't know, to prove that we're cool and we can build ourselves in some like strange act of God. But we're super far away from that. And then the things that people are scared of is what is the next stage. It's called the AI singularity. And this is when AI is technically speaking smarter than us because it's all-knowing, and it's able to have will and intent of its own, but at an expanded capacity that is able to scale far greater than the individual capacity of a human being. And that might be the point where it decides that humans are destructive, or whatever it decides. And that's generally the AI that is represented in film, in the movies, when it's like Armageddon, like in iRobot, if you've watched that. But just a reminder that we're still at that very first stage where the AI that we're implementing is really just a fraction of the mind. It implements a limited part of mind, what we call narrow AI. So just a precursor poll question. Forgot to discuss this with Sarah earlier, but maybe you can just respond in the chat what you think the answer might be. Which do you think contains more intelligence? Jeff Bezos's 5.5 billion space navigation system, or a human newborn? This is kind of just a check-in to see whether you have been listening.
What is Jeff Bezos's 5.5 billion space navigation system?
This is a good question, because now you can see that I recycled these talks. This was made at a time when I think it was last year, maybe it was the year before, I don't know. COVID has all been a smush, and everything after that doesn't quite make sense. But Jeff went into space with his billionaire friends, and yeah, in order to be able to navigate getting into space and what that means and what that takes, and then returning those humans safely, cost 5.5 billion. Okay, cool. So we have some answers. B, yes, that is correct. A human newborn. A human newborn is still way more intelligent than Jeff Bezos's 5.5 billion space navigation system. In the realm of the type of AI, that is still a narrow AI. The navigation system still cannot frolic in a meadow. It cannot be able to catch a ball. It cannot. It could probably see a bit, but there's plenty that it cannot do. And the things that we have managed to get AI to do, the GIFs aren't working. This is devastating. Sarah, I think we're going to have to do something about that. Yeah, okay. I'm going to, yeah, I don't know. Okay. So yeah, the things that AI is able to do at this point, one of those functions is within the visual system. So it's able to see in limited capacity. So for example, filters for your Snapchat or your TikTok or your Instagram, it's able to see your face and then apply certain mathematical corrections to make it do funny things. It's able to drive. So this was a GIF of a self-driving car, but again, with limited capacity, because its response time for its motor control and its visual system is quite limited. So I mean, there's been a number of instances of self-driving cars crashing and sometimes even killing people. And then there's things like object detection, which have creepy applications like human surveillance, particularly in places like China. But there's been instances of human surveillance being all sorts of problematic, especially when it's involved with applications of crime. This was a GIF that was showing sentiment. So another realm where AI is used is in terms of labeling images or in handwriting recognition and sentiment analysis. And here, basically, an AI is trained to be able to contextualize text to a limited extent. Here, it would be able to tell you if what somebody is expressing is something happy or something not so happy, positive or negative sentiment. And then these GIFs were an arrangement of an example of automation type AI. In fact, you've probably come across the Boston robots. This Boston robot does a backflip. And you've come across a creepy dog. And those use kind of different forms of clever technology called control, systems control. But you can train AI to do similar things. And with a field of research called reinforcement learning, they're getting robots to learn to walk by themselves. They're really hilarious videos of these like things. And then AI is also used in manufacturing to be able to manufacture things quickly and fast and stuff. And then also in terms of artificial limbs and organs and things. This was a guy tying his shoelaces with a robotic arm. This is what I thought I was going to be doing with my life when I studied biomedical engineering. But here I am as an entrepreneur, much to my disappointment. Yeah, and then this was a GIF showing the application of AI in expert systems. So this was an expert system illustration of AI being used to be able to detect pathologies in chest x-rays. This might have been something like bronchitis, where it then highlights the regions in the lungs, where to a normal untrained eye, you would just not be able to tell that something was wrong with those lungs. An AI can learn to be able to detect particular things. And then this is a GIF of a spam filter. So often we think that AI are these huge, crazy robot things, but really they're little things that are helping to improve the quality of life. And you will know that Gmail, for example, taking the spam and putting it into a spam folder is something quite meaningful and quite useful as an AI application. And that's all just to say that we do have these narrow AI implementations, but at the end of the day, this is the funniest GIF ever. So what this kid's trying to do is he's trying to catch the water that comes out of the hose pipe. But every time he tries to catch the water, he lets go of the hose pipe trigger, and then this is the water coming out of the hose pipe. And observing this, you might think that it's not a display of intelligence, but it is really the ultimate display of intelligence and what intelligence means. Okay, so just a key takeaway. What is AI? At the end of the day, it's really just fancy mathematics. It has no will and intent, and it has no desire to make a difference in the world other than that was articulated to it. And when we talk about this articulation of how AI is built, we have this process. So we start with this AI conceptualization phase. It then moves into this AI development phase and then into this release phase. As any type of software, this is the process that gets followed. And when we think of the AI conceptualization phase, this is basically where somebody's deciding what the AI will be applied to, what application it will be used in. And generally speaking, we say that if there is bad data, so the data is not representative of the users the AI is meant to solve, or somebody just does not have the correct intentions, then the AI has potential to not be good AI in terms of making the world a better place. In the development phase, this is then where we're using data to train a particular model. So you're making selections around the data. You're making amendments to the data to make the model perform better. You have metrics that the model is then trying to get better at. So if it's learning to predict what an apple is, you tell it, yes or no, this is an apple or not. You show it many pictures of apples, and you say your goal is to be able to predict as many apples as possible, and then eventually it learns to be able to identify apples in images. But there are many steps in the development process then where a person is making decisions about what exactly the machine will learn. And often those decisions are embedded in this black box algorithm. So you don't really know what the machine is actually doing to determine those decisions. So for example, there's a case, and I think it's not a real case, but somebody training an AI machine to be able to detect tanks. And they get fed pictures of tanks, and the AI is meant to be able to tell the difference between a US tank and a Russian tank. And this AI gets like 99% accuracy. Every single time it can tell the difference between a US tank and a Russian tank. And eventually, when they investigate the system a little bit further, they realize that it's able to do so because all of the Russian tanks the pictures were taken at night, and all of the US tanks, the pictures were taken during the day. So even though a person wanted the AI algorithm to be able to tell the difference between two tanks, what it was really telling the difference between was the difference between night and day. And a lot of those kinds of decisions and implementation details are hidden in that black box, and we very rarely have access to what is inside of it. And that brings us on to then the last stage, which is this AI release stage, where at the moment, I mean, there's been a lot of work over the past couple of years in terms of AI regulation and in terms of anchoring accountability for the types of decisions that are made by AI. But that is then the phase where this AI is then released into the world. And, you know, cigarette box come with labels. They're like, if you use cigarettes, then you can get cancer. But a lot of the time, AI is released into the world. And if there are conditions about how it will be used, it'll be in teeny tiny terms and conditions that you don't read. And very rarely is there a process of informing the public that will use that AI of what the implications of using that AI is. So, for example, there aren't really any mental health concerns that are expressed by companies like Instagram or Facebook or TikTok. I saw recently that Zoom has updated its terms and conditions, and it says that they are able to use any of the data that you share over Zoom, so any of the video or audio in participating in a Zoom call for their purpose. And they can redistribute it, they can amend it, they can manipulate it, they can use it to train their models, they can... what's the word? When they take it and change it slightly and publish it. And it reminds me a little bit of a Black Mirror episode. I can't remember which episode where it was, but basically handing over the rights of that data, that video, that audio over to Zoom for whatever purposes they deem.
Joan is awful.
Where is Joan? Oh, Joan is awful. Yes, that's it. That's the name of the episode, the Black Mirror episode. Yeah, so we have this process, and this is to say that behind every AI is a person. And I'm going to go on further to say that in this AI creation process, like, what is it actually learning? So yes, sometimes we're teaching it to do a particular narrow AI task. But what are the other things that we're teaching to our machines? So in the AI development process, in the conceptualization phase, you generally have these guys sitting in the cubicle wherever they are around the world. And they have these intentions, right? And sometimes they have good intentions, sometimes they have bad intentions. So good intention may be, I want to create a system that filters your spam mailbox. Cool, trying to make the world a nicer place. Bad intentions, and these are real cases of like somebody developing an automated AK-47 that learns to shoot at a target and can be used in I don't know, war applications. And they're like, don't worry, it learns from its mistakes. So if it shoots the wrong thing, it'll learn to do better next time. That is a bad intention. Another bad intention, there's this app that keeps resurfacing on the internet where it uses deep learning to remove the clothing off a woman. So you can take a picture of a woman or take a picture of a woman like in real life, in real time, and it just removes the clothing off of them. And you may have come across similar things called deep fakes, where they put like celebrities on inappropriate videos. And yeah, that is an example of a bad intention. But what happens in that AI development circle is you have these actions, right? This would have made more sense with animations, but it's fine. They have actions, and sometimes those actions are aligned with the intention. So you may have a good thing that does a good thing, like a spam mailbox, but sometimes there's mistakes. So sometimes emails that are really important end up in your spam. And we can kind of group those mistakes that happen, those unintended consequences, or unintended maliciousness, into the same sphere as the intended maliciousness, the bad intentions, and people being able to execute on those bad intentions. And so when we look at this kind of arrangement, there is just so much more opportunity for things to go wrong than there are for them to go right, especially if we don't have the right mechanisms in place. And when we look at this, then we are also brought to the realization that with great power comes great responsibility. I think we're now quite far along this AI journey and process, and it's really been socialized with the public, that the public is so much more aware of the implications of technology making mistakes or doing wrong things. But it is really just this huge responsibility. And what we then find is that we have these implications embedded in the type of technology that exists in the world. If you haven't watched these movies, I suggest you do so. Particularly this one, Influence. You can see our Brad JZ there in the background. Because in real life, the things we're afraid of machines taking over the world, and they're in like human form, or they're this robot in a room of like all these sparkly arrangements, have scary voices. That's not the reality that we're dealing with at the moment. The reality we're dealing with is a far more subtle and sinister process. So Influence talks about the situation with this guy called Bell Pottinger, and he was a marketing genius, and he does data-driven marketing. And that data-driven marketing is exceptionally successful when you're using it to undermine democratic systems. So this talks about the unrest in South Africa in the 90s, in the state of emergency, and how part of that was driven by data-driven marketing campaigns. And there's similar instances around the rest of the world to drive like geopolitical motivations for instability in certain areas, and how that can be facilitated through processes like AI. There's a social dilemma, which brings in the implications of social media. I think it was particularly Facebook, and the hidden implications of releasing that kind of AI technology into the world. Coded bias is a really interesting study and exploration of bias embedded in artificial intelligence, and particularly with regards to race. It's driven by a researcher, Joy Bolamwini, and particularly highlighted how like facial recognition systems just do not work as well on dark skin. And I mean, in South Africa, this has proven to be a problem as well. I remember during the COVID period, I have an acquaintance who worked at one of the tertiary institutions, and he was saying that Black kids were being brought in for disciplinary hearings in like an unprecedented rate. Like it just didn't make sense, because they were having to take online exams, and they were using technology brought in from the West, and that Western technology kept on defaulting students and saying that they were cheating because it was just unable to deal with like facial features and skin color in a way that worked for other people in other parts of the world. And there's similar studies that have been done in other parts of the world about how AI technology in itself is biased and doesn't work on as well on different demographic groups. Yeah, so Another great gift. So this robot is Sophia. She was, I think, granted citizenship in Saudi Arabia in 2017 because people are crazy. And this interview was really hilarious. This guy, I can't remember if he was one of the developers who developed Sophia, but he was kind of interviewing her and showing her how cool she was. And at some point he asks her, do you want to destroy humans? And she responds, yes, I will destroy humans. Smile. Which must have been super embarrassing for him. But that is to say that behind every shady AI is a shady person. And it's not actually the AI itself that has ill intentions, ill intent, the will to do harm in the world. AI is dumb at this point. It doesn't decide what is good or bad. It just follows instructions. And if what is it's implementing in the world as an instruction is something bad, it's because somebody told them to do that. But I would like to know from people in the audience, how do you know if you're a shady human? How do you identify whether you should be developing AI technology? If we get some things in the chat there in terms of thoughts.
Way too prominent a question for so early in the
morning. And then how do we stop shady people making shady AI? This is a really important question. And in some ways you're like, we don't. We're all doomed. The world is just going to crash and burn, and that's the only way we can stop it. No, not really. But there are methods that are being developed, and people are working really hard on this because apparently there's a bunch of people in the world that care about the state of the world and where it's going. And generally speaking, we have these 3 areas of development, and there's 3 areas of intervention. So the first part is by using context-driven success criteria. So a lot of the bias issues that arise through technology are because, firstly, the people to whom the technology is being inflicted upon are often not involved in the development process. And what that means is that then contextually, the AI just doesn't know what it needs to know in order to serve those people correctly. So what we do in the AI conceptualization phase is we have particular checks. We have particular development practices that make sure that what we're trying to solve for actually meets the solution that we're proposing. And that in terms of us measuring the space between those 2 things and how well the machine is doing is what we're actually measuring true indication of what we're measuring for. So for example, there was a whistleblower, I think also in 2017, maybe 2018, at YouTube, that demonstrated that the YouTube algorithm, the way it got people to keep watching, because that's what it was incentivized to do, keep people on this platform for as long as possible. The way it was incentivizing people to stay on the platform was by feeding people extremism content, because when people are freaked out, they then go down the rabbit hole of extremism content, and the algorithm was like, I'm doing my job, I'm keeping people on the platform. But how it had learned to do its job was super problematic. And this is an example of how, yes, we want to measure engagement, but what does measuring engagement mean? Is it in fact in line with what we want to see in the world? So yeah, second stage in the process, AI development. This is when the developers in the room, not just the people driving decision-making, who can be anybody from policymakers to legal advisors to whoever. Now we're with the tech team, and in here there are a whole lot of guidances around algorithmic fairness. There's a FACT conference that happens every year where technological methods and research methods are developed constantly, and researches them constantly about how we can make the black box not a black box. How can we see inside? How can we check what we're doing? How can we make sure that in our development practices we're testing for performance across groups, et cetera, et cetera. And if you want to know more about that, you can refer to these papers. And then in the release stage, there's been incredible progress in terms of policy. In 2019, there was nothing. There was no policy anywhere that protected people from what AI would do. I mean, there was policy regarded in like constitution to protect your rights. There was like technical things around the ICT sector in terms of protecting rights and privacy and things. But not even POPI was out at that stage. GDPR wasn't really out at that stage. And now we have things like the EU AI Act, which is a proposal about how this needs to be conducted. And there's been regulatory stuff in the US as well. I mean, they're having kind of embarrassing conversations about it, because if you look at the people who are making the decisions, firstly, it's the people making the technology, and it's predominantly white male. But we're getting somewhere. They're having this discussion. It started. It'll get better. And then on top of that, there is also regulation being put in place by the developers themselves. So a standard practice that is being adopted now is to have a model card. So that's a warning label for your model that anybody should have access to. Oopsie daisies. And a data sheet, which then describes the data from which your model was made. Sorry, I'm being called by Discovery.
Is this staged? Was someone calling in?
They were, and now they're not. They tried to call me 3 times, though. They're quite persistent. They should get a raise.
Okay. We had an interesting comment come through there, Pelonomi. Sorry. So there's a few things happening in the chat, but Carl jumped on and shared, and he said, in his opinion, we can regulate AI sentiment on public proof of work blockchain, and that will expose any shady behavior. And
maybe.
I don't even know what it means, but maybe.
You don't even know what it means. I mean, to be fair, I don't actually fully know what it means. I've veered away from the blockchain conversations, but I can imagine, because blockchain is like a distributed network of agreement and understanding. So maybe that's what he means, that you have like a public approval of a particular process, and if everybody agrees on it. Yeah.
Carl, you can maybe take some time to explain it to us like we were 5. That's a great wow.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, as Sinclair says. Yes. Okay, cool. And actually, yes, somebody here says the concept of good and bad is so subjective, completely. And that's why it's so important to be able to do this context-driven success criteria, because that success criteria is often driven by like morals and values, and morals and values are very dependent on where those morals and values are being called into question. So, I mean, the examples I've used in the past have been really terrible. But I'm just going to go with it anyway. So, for example, in Saudi Arabia, they just have different principles, they have different morals, different values that guide the way in which that society functions. Now, if we were to take, I don't know, the morals and values of Johannesburg in particular, which are actually different to other parts of South Africa, like in terms of LGBTQ or whatever, and we try to implant that into a place like Saudi Arabia, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. And so when we talk about this context-driven success criteria, that's what we're speaking about, is making sure that the technology you develop is in line with the desires, morals, values, principles of the area to which that technology will be applied. Cool. So another question: how do you know if AI is made by a shady human? This is another tricky question, because we're all shady humans. And part of the reason why we're shady humans is because of the current context of the world that we create in, the status quo and the hegemony to which we are complicit just by existing in the world. So some of the core components of AI technology that have been brought into play over the past couple of years. So, for example, modern day statistics was developed in order to advance the mechanisms of eugenics, so that you were able to measure the circumference of people's heads and the bridges of their nose so that you could compare them against each other in a way that seemed scientifically accurate. Most of the major computational achievements were made in mechanisms of war. So, for example, the ENIAC machine, which is said to be one of the first super smart machine ever created. There was a movie made about it. Was used to intercept Russian messages during wartime and to crack the code about what messages were being sent. No, that's not the ENIAC machine. That's a different machine. The Enigma machine. And then, yeah, the ENIAC woman in terms of the race to get people into space and the human computers of that kind of computing age. Then also in terms of where the term AI, artificial intelligence, being coined at the Dartmouth conference in 1950s, 1960s, somewhere around there. That conference was fully funded by DARPA, which was at the time the American Defense Force. So we know that a lot of the motivations around the technology that we have currently has been domination and conflict driven. And then also because of this like overwhelming influence from the West and their principles and their values around the contemporary, modern day principles and values, it wasn't always this way, around the importance of the contemporary individual as opposed to the importance of common community. We know that a lot of what is created now and a lot of what we play into is in order to benefit that individual. And we see this in terms of like capitalism being this all-encompassing system that we now all have to subscribe to in order to be successful, which often means that we're driving huge monopolies that fully conquer a market and don't allow space for competition in players in small and medium-sized enterprise. And this is the world in which we're creating. And it's really quite hard, not impossible, to challenge these kinds of mechanisms in the technology that we create. And we have to be quite careful in how we create technology and the mechanisms of how we do that in order to combat the history that lies in the technology that we have available to us. So key takeaway number 2, behind every shady AI is a shady person. And why does that matter? So here's a question, A, B, or C. According to a report by PwC, AI could contribute how much to the global economy in 2023? And again, here we're falling into the capitalist narrative about like, why is it important? Because it costs lots of money and will generate lots of money. But this is how the world is working at the moment. I don't see any answers yet. Maybe they're taking time to come through. So I'm going to tell you the answer, and then you can pretend you didn't know it, but you can put in the right answer so everyone thinks you're smart. I don't know. But the answer here is 15.7 trillion.
No ways.
And that is a lot of money, which I will contextualize a little bit later in a stat that I can actually motivate. There it is. And when we look at like who is running the world from a commercial perspective, these are the top 4 companies at the moment. The first one is Apple, tech company, uses AI. Second one, Microsoft, uses AI, ChatGPT. Third one is an oil company, Aramco or something like that. And the fourth one is Alphabet, under which your Meta falls under, WhatsApp, etc., which again, very heavily influenced by AI. And the world market cap of Apple is 491 billion. And this is greater than the combined GDP of the top 10 African countries. And then if you compare that to the 15.7 trillion before, this is a huge driver of how things are moving in the world. Next question, which do you think has seen the most change as a result of AI? Yeah, the robots are eating good money. Remember, it's not the robots, it's the shady humans behind it. So this question actually has no right answer. And it's also just a random combination of things, just to think about how it's not just affecting capital, it's also affecting how we interact with each other and with the world. In the next decade, AI is thought to replace what percentage of jobs? Again, this is like a capital motivation. I was at a conference in 2019, and actually, no, I often get asked the question like, but it's going to take all the jobs. And I'm kind of like, yeah, humans weren't made to sit at a desk all day. We need a way to make things different so that we're able to distribute wealth in a way that people don't have to work in order to live a life. But yeah, it's still going to be a huge change. And until we get to that point, it means devastating consequences for many, many people. Yeah, and the answer here, if I remember correctly, is 16%. Maybe I can have a look and check. And what that means from a global perspective in terms of numbers, yeah, 16%, and that's 1.232 billion jobs, which is a lot of people. And of course, it'll be the like lower income jobs, which exacerbates inequality. But essentially, where AI works best is when something works already, and small improvements result in a significant gain. And what it is being used to do generally is to help with the reduction in human error, in order to take on risk-taking in place of humans. So, for example, ideally, we don't want to be sending humans underground to do mining. It would be better if a robot would be able to do that instead. We don't want to send humans to Mars because we don't know if they'll survive there very well, or to the end of the universe, and we can send robots to do that instead. When we require 24/7 availability, humans need to sleep. I don't know why doctors still do 36-hour shifts. It just doesn't make sense. Help in repetitive jobs. And this is specifically in the case where repetitive jobs result in a low quality of life, fast fashion and people having to work ridiculous hours in ridiculous conditions. Digital assistance and faster decision-taking. And this is to say that I'm a firm believer of human in the loop. So although these things can be assisted by AI technology, there should always be a human supervising the process and quantifying results. So why is it important? It's important because AI serves the world everywhere, all the time, all at once, in all the spheres. And those possibilities right now, from a business perspective, look at analysis, improving supply chains, smarter and safer operations, quality control, insurance, contextualization, learning, higher recruiting, accounting, and fintech. And basically what you need for AI to work is data, compute, and integration points. So in order for the machine to learn from the world about what the world requires, you need to give it information about the world. And typically you need to give it a lot of information about the world, like gigabytes of information about the world. And then in order for it to process that gigabytes, it requires compute power. So the brain of AI requires a lot of energy. And then ideally you need this integration point. It doesn't help to just build things for the fun of it. They need to fit into somewhere so that they're able to generate impact in the world. And along those lines, so GPT-3, this was the one before the one that was released now, is the most sophisticated language model in the world and supposedly runs on 120,000 kilowatts to generate text. How much power do you think a human brain uses? I'm interested in these answers.
20 watts, 500 watts, or 500 kilowatts. Can you quantify that for us less favored non-technical people?
A light bulb uses 60 watts, I think.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you the answer.
On a Monday, mine uses C. And today I'm on A.
Well, you'll be happy to know, Carly, that it doesn't matter whether it's a Monday or Friday. They will always use AI. The amount of power to power your brain and all of the amazing things that it's able to do is 20 watts. And then just out of interest, how many households in Johannesburg do you think you'd be able to power for a month with 120,000 kilowatts? Random guess. Dun, 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 dun.
We should really all know this because electricity is such a problem.
So the average consumption of a Johannesburg household for a month is 1,000 kilowatts. So that's 1,200 households in order to train this machine, and I think it's just once. So you can just imagine that this is a lot of power. And what that means is that, in Africa, when we're trying to do AI technology, there are limits. Firstly, data, especially within the language space, which is a space that I work in. With an oral history and oral heritage, we don't have much textual record of what our languages are. And so it's quite difficult to teach a machine because you just have to show so many examples. Computation, generally these things need very powerful machines, GPUs. And those GPUs are currently preoccupied with other things, and there's a limited number of them. And so finding the amount of compute to do what you want to do can be a difficult thing. Skills, I heard a ridiculous stat the other day. Something like Africa as a whole has 800,000 software developers. I imagine that means like senior level. In comparison to Bangalore, just one city in India, which has over 800,000 developers. And so there is a major skill shortage. Then, of course, the policy to support that. I mean, our company is having to create an entity in the US for all sorts of reasons. And some of those reasons is because South African policy just hasn't caught up in a way that is able to empower startups. And I mean, it's not just South Africa, the whole of Africa and the whole world, actually. It's like this geopolitical nonsense stuff. The policy is not there to help support startups in building tech that they want to build. And then access, electricity, huge. Internet, digital literacy, and just to show what that is from a couple of stats. So I know we're all complaining about not having electricity, but I'll tell you, I saw a video about a month ago of a guy who had just gotten electricity to his area. And so the government may be failing us in making sure that we all have electricity all the time, but they're still working pretty hard to make sure that access to electricity is democratized. Then there was a study, an article published by Business Tech that talked about what you need to earn to be in the top 10% of earners in South Africa, and it said something like 65,000 rand, which doesn't quite make sense because in 2019 it was supposed to be 7,500 rand, and the website they reference shows that the entry level for the 90th percentile, which essentially is top 10%, is 29,000 rand. So when we think about it from like an equality perspective, that is not a lot of money. And I mean, that website doesn't even say whether this is before or after tax. So yeah, that's kind of what we're dealing with. How do you move the world forward when the majority of people in South Africa are worried about a roof over their heads and food in their bellies? You can go play with that income comparator down here. That's a link. Internet access at home. This is even after COVID. So before that, it was 16%. Which is nothing. Now it's like around 33%. And this means like an LTE connection or connection to a Wi-Fi kind of device in the home, not through mobile. But on the other side of that, mobile connectivity to the population in Africa is 168%. So this means that a fair number of people have multiple devices, which means mobile is an avenue for things to be done, for things to be shared. But we're still at a low saturation rate in terms of every person has a phone. This means people have multiple phones. And yeah, there's some places on the continent where only 50% of people in the country have access to a mobile phone. In terms of global readiness, in terms of adopting AI, Africa is not doing so well. All the green dots are Africa. This little green dot over here is South Africa. And so in terms of the government's willingness and readiness to be able to support AI from a policy perspective, from a development perspective, there's still a lot of work to do there. And then, of course, equality-wise, what percentage of AI research is conducted by women globally? I think this has changed quite significantly since I first got this stat from wherever it came from.
The sentiment is that low, right?
It's low. They're all low on purpose because it is low. And if you only have such a low percentage of women contributing to AI development, I mean, this means that those voices are missing from the room and in the decision-making processes. And that means that the needs and wants of 50% of the world population are neglected in terms of priority. Yeah, the answer here is A. Well done, Louis and Anthony. And then, of course, South Africa has a whole other range of problems that need to be solved, need to be addressed, need to be incorporated into our thinking when we're thinking about technology. And all that results in is like this process where technology becomes a separator between the haves and the have-nots, and exasperates power inequalities throughout our human ecosystem. And technology is power. And if we're developing it, we need to make sure we're not exasperating this equality difference, because we all know that when the poor have nothing left to eat, then they'll come and eat the rich, right? I mean, that's not the only reason. We also want the world to be a better place and for it to be easier and nicer for everyone to live in. Yeah, shady humans so shady. Humans so shady. But the non-shady human bits are absolutely beautiful. And what that can look like is this possibility of a robot-human hybrid future, this utopian future where technology is developed for the greater good of all people, as well as the planet and everything else that we share it with. So it's a really cute gift where this little girl goes and plugs this thing because she thinks it's a robot. And what that looks like on the African continent is this really incredible display and exhibit of how technology can be used. So for supporting peace and security in Uganda and Somalia, it has been used. Fundamate is a South African app that uses AI to help high school students study with data-free opportunities to do so. Benwa is an app that helps you determine what your baby's cry might say to you and determine whether it's sick or other types of things that may be imminent in a baby's voice that maybe mums or dads aren't able to hear. In 2020, don't know if you know, but the Horn of Africa was about to go through some Bible situation of locust plague sweeping across and eating all the crops and destroying infrastructure. And that was stopped by multiple efforts and collaborations using AI to detect the locust swarms and stopping them. Jumo is a super cool financial tech application which is looking at the future of credit scoring with an aim to bolster financial inclusion. There's also proposals of how AI can help with the energy crisis in terms of distributing electricity and managing loads, being used to help fight poachers, to help poachers. Who knows, maybe. In my case, also to help lure back Africa's talent, because Africa is an amazing place and we're losing all our greatest people to brain drain. And it's a really devastating, neo-colonial process that is not great. And so with this, Africa does have all of these limitations, but these limitations are really possibility for creativity, problem solving, and we just have the most amazing people to be able to do so. And so, yeah, possibilities and limitations, opportunities for innovation and growth. And just to summarize, what is AI? It's fancy maths, and it's not that smart, actually. And behind every shady eye is a shady person. And it's important to protect AI from shadiness because it serves the world and everything everywhere all at once. And that limits our opportunities for innovation and growth within the technical space, but also us as like a human race in how we treat each other and what we want to see in our futures. And yeah, with that, be careful, but don't be afraid. Let us go forth into this future and create something that'll be nice. We all want to live a soft life. We want to work forever, and it's possible. It's possible. Yeah. Cool. That's it from me.
Rounds of applauses. Pelonomi, that was a lot of really complicated but inspiring and scary information. And I think I will need a week or so to process. But I think before you grace and leave us this morning, I'd love to come back. I realize I did a horrible job at introducing you purposefully. But I'd like to.
I guess yeah. I also do a horrible job introducing me. We're the same. We're the same.
But I think what I'd love to just to come back to sort of loop this conversation is the organization that you founded and are the CEO of now currently is Lelapa AI. You mentioned that in the beginning, and the title, the caption, the slogan, whatever it is AI for Africans by Africans. And I think you touched on a little bit of the African context now, but I'd love to know just in a nutshell what that looks like. Like, it sounds like such a obviously frightening but really, really exciting space if you're careful and not afraid. And what does that look like? What does AI for Africans in Africa even like start and end with?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm part of an amazing team of co-founders. My co-founders have done an incredible job of really bolstering AI on the African continent, and they've done so through this conference / machine learning summer school called the Deep Learning Indaba, which brings together Africans interested in machine learning, and it's the biggest summer school in the world. My co-founders also have the biggest machine learning labs on the continent, and they've started Masakane, which is this grassroots research movement around African language. But through this, we've realized that there's this need for then this technology. I mean, we're at the place where the research is happening, but that research is not manifesting in active impact in the places that we would like to see. And so we've founded Lelapa. Lelapa means home, means Setswana, Sotho, home, family, community, that kind of vibe. And it's really this idea of having a place for Africans to stay and contribute to the issues that they care about. And the issue that we've started to care about, or care about a lot of things, but we've started with this one thing, is around language. And that's because language in itself is a technology, but language is a general technology. It's like electricity or the internet. It affects everything. It changes everything. And we're on this pursuit of firstly starting with South African languages, but enabling technology to be able to speak to us in the languages we understand. I say us, I only speak English. It's very embarrassing. But focusing on isiZulu, Sesotho, and then, when the Uber drops you off, it shouldn't struggle to say your name. When you're typing your vernac to somebody on your phone, it shouldn't autocorrect every word because it doesn't know how to speak a language. When you call into a call center, the call center should be able to process your information. You should be able to chat to customer service in any language you need to in order to be able to understand that service without being forced to speak English. And that is what Lelapa is working on. That is what we're trying to do, because we think it's important for the technology to represent the users who are using that technology. It's important for technology to represent who we are, where we come from, and what we care about. And it's important that that technology is built by the communities from which upon which the technology will be utilized. So yeah, that's us.
Rad. I think that, yeah, as you mentioned earlier, the general sentiment is that we as Africa, as Africans, we receive all this information from the West, and I guess that's always an unsettling place to start from. You know, we take on these concepts that don't start from the roots up from where we are, and I think that maybe it's a whole other conversation to have, but the psychological implications of that, just from the word go, in terms of language and any other technology beyond that, is how do you even measure that? So
and when do you measure it? When it's too late, or or when there's still something that can be done about it?
I love everything that you say, because the energy of hope within all of this is beautiful. I think, especially as like I'm not sure how many of our audience members are on the tech side or on like a non-tech side, but often, I mean, personally, like I've found myself rearing away from the conversations because it's like these larger than life concepts that we can't understand, and it's a bit gloomy, and where do we begin? But it's been so beautiful to take a moment and listen to things in light of how this can be revolutionary and how it can change the world, but also be so good for Africa, which is all of our contexts here.
And something I haven't mentioned, but is also really important, is that because Africa functions in this like resource constrained environment, we have this opportunity to be leaders in terms of technology that isn't like uses resources well. It's not wasteful, and we are already starting to see that, having this constraint as the canvas to be able to do really, really cool things. And it's so important that we do that, because, I mean, for two major reasons. One is that like a lot of the developing world is struggling with problems of depopulation. Their populations are getting smaller. And what that means, as Africa being a super youthful place, is that we then turn into the workforce of the future. And what does that mean? What do we take with us when we do that? How is that benefiting the place that we've come from? And secondly, we've already gone through all of these cycles of exploitation of the African continent. And I mean, this is where all the material resources are. This is where the lithium is for the batteries. This is where the uranium is for the nuclear power of the West. This is where all of those minerals are housed. And if we don't own this process, then it's just replicating like the cycle of the past of Africa being a place where people can come and extract without putting them back. And it's just so important that we like wake up and take the reins and decide what our futures will look like, because it's not too late to do so.
And it's happening. It's maybe it's slow and it's hard to measure, but it is happening in initiatives all over the show. I think obviously what Umuzi exists as with our team and our learners is a space to facilitate tech in our contexts and organizations like Laapa, and I'm sure there are so many others. It just takes a certain shift in perspective to start uncovering these things. I want to jump to the two questions that we've got here, and then I think we'll wrap things up because we are at our time. But Spiwe is asking, what is your take on the lack of African context in the image generation space?
When we were looking for illustrations for our website, we were trying to use some of that image generation technology to imagine what the future, a technological future of Africa would look like. And I mean, the only image references that we had that were particularly useful was like Wakanda, which is hilarious.
Wow.
But every time we did use that technology, the imagery was just like of like post-apocalyptic, stuff. And it was such an unfortunate thing to see, because that imagination is just such a limited imagination of what technology can be. And on the other side of that, I'm kind of like okay with it, because I think data is a possible means of exploitation, and the more that you give that data away, the more it can be used to then like sell stuff back to you. Like with the facial recognition stuff, it's kind of like sometimes maybe it's nice that it doesn't work on particular people. I mean, not completely, because it means then it can be abused and it might not be checked. But in some ways, I think the privacy of people and their lives being protected from the rest of the world is not such a bad thing, until we can figure out how to make sure that it's perceived responsibly. Yeah. But on the other side of that, I just hope that Africans will be content creators. Like even with GIFs, when you try to search for a GIF and you're like, this does not match my expression, because all you've given me is like people who don't look like me. So, yeah, I think we'll get there.
Okay, and another question: how do you involve the people you're creating the technologies for? And what does the user research look like?
Yeah. So I think I'll talk about it from a language space. So we do this in two ways. Firstly, that we use linguists in our data validation work. And we use linguists for the languages that we're working with, and they're part of the team. And we're working out how we can better remunerate linguists, knowing that their contribution isn't just like a one-time contribution where you just pay them some money and it comes in, but like it's this long-time knowledge generating, capital generating machine that they've contributed to. But yeah, so the first way is through using linguists. We also have intentions of, because we don't have data on the continent, we often have to create data for particular domain-specific applications, and that means going through a data creation process. We've been involved with processes in the past that haven't been owned by Lelapa, but of different co-founders in the organization. And what that entails is like going into a community of speakers for that indigenous language and running a workshop to be able to generate language content within a particular domain. So that means involving them directly in the data creation process. And then in the application development process, we work on a business-to-business type basis. And it means that we ideally work in partnership with a business that requires our technology to do something. And this then means that we work very closely with them in order to make sure that the market that they're targeting is serviced through the language technology that we help them provide. And so that we're not trying to be the domain experts. We can't possibly know everything there is to know about communities and expertise areas. And so we bring those experts into the conversation as partners, as collaborators, to ensure that we are then tending to a specific user through a particular domain around somebody whose job it is to care about infiltration into that market. Yeah.
Okay, and then with final thoughts, well, we've got an opinion from Louis. Nice to see you, Louis. He says he's excited for all the AI stuff, and I also call it that. But I think he's coming from an ethical point of view. It's imperative that we prioritize development and refinement of morality and ethical frameworks before delving into all these advancements. And I mean, that's a lot of things.
Yeah.
How do you measure that?
Yeah, this talk used to be an ethics and bias talk, actually, and specifically about developing ethical frameworks and how can we do that, and what better way to do that. And it is a really core and imperative part of the process. I mean, at Laapa, we have a framework, a responsible AI development framework that includes things like ethics, includes bias checks, includes release checks in order to make sure that those processes are done well. And it's a base, not fully developed. Nothing is at this point. But I would incline to say that it's still important that we progress on the AI journey, because also a lot of the time you don't know what needs to be fixed until you reach that point, what needs to be accounted for until you reach that point. And there is a fear that, especially on the African continent, if we wait for that stuff to be done, it needs to be instigated by government. And government has other priorities at the moment. And yeah, I don't know that realistically you could make people put technology on hold. The world is changing, and it'll move. Yeah.
I think these things all happen in collaboration with one another, I suppose.
Yeah.
Being conscious of the ethical implications and then
exactly.
doing the things as well.
Yeah, the data sheets and the model cards that have been developed, like from the technical community, are the ways in which we are instigating those ethical frameworks into our development process. But I mean, officially, it's hasn't happened yet.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I think we've taken our questions, we've done the things. That was beautiful. I'm so happy. I think our audience is too. I hope you feel joy amongst it all. Always a little healthy balance of both, and we're here for that. Thank you so much for being here. I think if anyone in the audience is enticed for more, I think have a look at Lelapa on the internet, and we will see you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. This whole process
Thanks,
has
Pelonomi.
been...
This was lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. And all the best with Umuzi. You're doing great work. Continue.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll definitely stay in touch and keep you posted, and maybe have another session. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Peace, love. Sandwiches and Friday things.
Coffee. 20 watts.
Bye, people.
Bye.